Why is it taking so long for spouses of permanent residents to be able to file their adjustment of status applications? This does include spouses of permanent residents who file for VAWA petitions. Why do they have to wait to file the adjustment of status application? Well, this is because there is a cap on the amount of immigrant visa numbers that are available to spouses of permanent residents in any given year. Because of this, the Department of State has created a wait list, and the length of time you stay on that wait list is dependent on the National Visa Bulletin. So there are two things you have to keep in mind and you have to watch for when going through the process as the spouse of a permanent resident. You first have to be able to determine what your priority date is. That is on your receipt notice, that letter that you get once you file the I-130 petition or the I-360 petition. And then you have to understand the date that is assigned on the National Visa Bulletin in any given month that is also based on your immigrant category and on your country of birth. I know it's a mouthful. I'll break this down step by step for you so that it can make more sense. Okay, so you're the spouse of a permanent resident. Your permanent resident spouse wants to file for you. Or you may be in a situation where you're being mistreated by that permanent resident spouse. So you want to file for VAWA. The first step you're going to take is to file the I-130 if you're going through the process with your spouse, or the I-360 petition if you're filing for VAWA based on mistreatment by that permanent resident spouse. Now, when this petition is filed, whether it's the I-130 or the I-360, you will get a receipt notice. That's acknowledgement that the Immigration Service, USCIS, has received the application and they are processing it. Now, on the petition, you're going to identify the receive date, which is usually the same as the priority date. There's usually a box on the receipt notice that shows the priority date, and it's usually similar to the received date. That's going to be a very important date because it is basically the number that you are assigned on the wait list. The wait list is the National Visa Bulletin. The National Visa Bulletin is mainly managed by the Department of State. Every month, the Department of State releases the National Visa Bulletin. And in that National Visa Bulletin are charts that indicate the category that you're in as an immigrant, the application type that you're applying for, a special date, which is going to tell you where you are on the wait list based on your priority date. And it's also all related to the country of your birth. In order to file the adjustment of status application as the spouse of a permanent resident, you have to have a current priority date on the National Visa Bulletin. So you're going to have to look at this Visa Bulletin. The USCIS also uses this National Visa Bulletin to be able to instruct immigrants on when it's time to apply for their adjustment of status application. Let's go ahead and explore what this National Visa Bulletin looks like. First of all, it's on the Department of State's website because they manage it. You're going to look for the most up-to-date month. It is July, but they have issued the National Visa Bulletin for August. And what that means is that the availability of immigrant visa numbers for August has already been issued. This National Visa Bulletin is used to summarize when an immigrant visa applicant should be notified to start filing their papers with the National Visa Center. For purposes of knowing when to file the adjustment of status application, you're going to want to pay attention to two charts: the final action dates chart and the dates for filing applications chart. These charts are under the Family Sponsored Preferences section of this National Visa Bulletin. Under the final action dates chart, it indicates which immigrants, based on their priority date, are authorized to receive those immigrant visa numbers. Under the dates for filing chart, it indicates based on the date that's on the chart, which immigrants are able to start preparing and submitting documentation for issuance of the immigrant visa number. Now, normally, under certain circumstances, they're going to use the final action chart that's going to tell you when to file your adjustment of status application. But under certain circumstances, the USCIS will instruct immigrants on whether they should use the dates for filing chart. For example, in this case, the USCIS has instructed immigrants to use the dates for filing chart to know when they're going to have to file their application. The USCIS has its own chart that will be able to tell you which chart you're going to use. So you're not going to be completely lost. That link to the USCIS chart is located on the National Visa Bulletin as well. So let's identify your category, and then we're going to take a look at the chart that the USCIS is currently using. As the spouse of a permanent resident, you're under the F2A category. So depending on which chart is going to be relevant for you to know when to file that adjustment of status application, you're going to identify your category on the chart. Then you're going to identify which country or default column you're going to fall under. On the chart, they have certain countries listed in columns, and then every other country is listed in one default column called all chargeability areas except those listed. Once you identify your category and which column you fall under, whether you fall under a specific country or under the default column, you're going to then look at the date that's applicable to you. That's a very important date, because once you identify the relevant chart that's going to tell you when to apply for your adjustment of status application, the next is you're going to be able to determine whether it's your time based on whether your priority date falls on or before the date that you've identified on the chart. So let's see which chart the USCIS is instructing immigrants to use to be able to tell when they can file their adjustment of status applications. Let's use an example. You're the spouse of a permanent resident, and you're also from Jamaica. So let's look now at the chart that the USCIS has up indicating when to file adjustment of status application. For August 2024, the USCIS has instructed immigrants to use the date for filing the adjustment of status application chart on the National Visa Bulletin. But they've made it a lot easier to determine what date is on the chart right there on their website. And it is June 15th, 2024. That's the date that shows under all categories for the F2A. So, if you were a spouse of a permanent resident and a Jamaican, you would fall under that default column, and you would be June 15, 2024. They're all June 15, 2024 right now, but sometimes they can be different. Now that we've determined the date on the chart, the next thing is to look at your priority date. Is your priority date on or before June 15, 2024? If it is, then that means it's time to file that adjustment of status application. If it's not, then you'll have to wait for that date to change. And that date has to be on or after your priority date for you to be able to move forward with your adjustment of status application. This applies to the I-130 petition as well as the I-360 VAWA petition. Here are some important things to note. Now, as the spouse of a permanent resident, if you're going through the marriage-based process with your spouse, that means your spouse is petitioning for you, you need to make sure that if you're looking at filing adjustment of status, that you have to maintain your legal status in order to be able to file the adjustment of status application. You cannot overstay your visa. Once you overstay your visa, unfortunately, you will not qualify for adjustment of status. This is different for VAWA. Once you file a VAWA petition and you've overstayed, you just have to make sure that your priority date is current or immigrant visa number is available to you by looking at the relevant chart. Once that date is up to par on the chart, it means it's time to go and file that adjustment of status application along with your work permit application and your travel document application. It's important to note this because this leads to a lot of mistakes. It's taking this long because it takes a while. It can take anywhere from 6 to 10 months to see movement on this national visa bulletin. We've just seen it move from September 1st, 2023 for the F2A category to now June 15th, 2024. So that means that hopefully they're moving it along again. We may just see current again. We'll have to see. So in the meantime, keep your eye on this chart if you want to know when it's time to file an adjustment of status application. And then also, if you're outside of the United States, you have a pending I-130 and it's about to be approved, you can use the National Visa Bulletin chart to be able to tell when the National Visa Center is going to process your applications and get your case ready for the interview. I hope this information has given you a better idea of why it takes so long for this process to move forward, because we have this National Visa Bulletin that adheres to the different types of numerical caps on immigrant visas that can be available every year. Hopefully, with the movement that we've seen, we'll continue to see it make progress and we may just see it get back to current. That's it for now. Like, subscribe. That is how more people will be able to see this helpful information. Until next time, thanks for watching.